Hello everyone, this is Fazana from Fazana's Law, and in today's video I'll be sharing with you all how to pass the advocacy module in the legal practice course. And if you're interested to find out the tips, then please keep watching this video till the end. So the advocacy part of the assessment is basically an assessment where you'll have to sit down, submit your speech basically for the next 20 minutes to a pretend judge who is usually going to be a teacher of yours at the university, and you basically have to submit an application on behalf of a client based on any kind of scenario that might be given 1 week or 2 weeks before the assessment. I can't really remember how many weeks before, but it's usually I think 1 week before the assessment you're given a scenario, you have to prepare basically a submission or an application for it. And that's basically pretty much what the advocacy assessment is all about. The first best tip I can give you in terms of the advocacy module is making sure that you are writing as many drafts as possible of your answer and try to practice as much as you can. And this is basically especially because you're going to be giving a very limited time limit, which is I believe 20 minutes. In my time it was 20 minutes where we had the time to actually submit all of our submissions and our whatever we had to say about the problem and the client and so on, opposite of a judge, of a pretend judge who is usually going to be a teacher of yours or a module leader or anything like that. So it's making sure that you are try to make sure that your drafts are as clear as possible so they're addressing everything that will be mentioned to you all in the next couple of minutes. And try to also make sure that you're looking at the sample guide or the sample answer that you're expected to write, and use that as a guide for you to make sure that you're writing your answers as detailed and also in a concise manner, so that you're not overly writing all of your stuff, but also you're not actually underwriting yourself and also not covering all the very important points in the assessment or for what is actually important for you to cover according to the sample guide answer. So make sure that you are writing as many drafts as possible, proofread it, practice it, and also make sure that you are writing the sample guide as well according to the sample guide, and that will really help you a lot in the advocacy assessment. So now I'm moving on to each part of the assessment in terms of the advocacy and try to tell you what are the best tips in terms of those particular sections and those particular structures according to what are basically you have to submit in the court, or the assessment day. So the first thing that we'll be covering is all about the introduction. The introduction, as you can see, is a very important part of the assessment, and the way you address yourself and the client and the facts and so on is very important because it gives an idea or the structure and an insight to the judge listening to you that what you're going to be talking about in the next 20 minutes. So the first thing that I highly recommend to write is all about introducing yourself, your name and who you are and so on. The second thing is to make sure that you are introducing your client and what do they do for a living, what is the job and so on. The third thing that you have to write is making sure that you're writing about what is the application for. Is it about seeking an injunction, or is it seeking a approval or seeking something? I don't even remember all the topics anymore. It's gone out of my window, but you know what I mean. If what I'm talking about makes sense to you. What is the application for? That's very important because that gives you the idea to the court that you know what you're talking about, what is the subject all about. The next thing that I would highly recommend for you to write about is seek permission to move on to the next section. This is very important. When you're done with your introduction, make sure that you are telling the court that, can I please move on to the next section, or may I move on to the next section now to talk about the facts of the case and so on. So it's very important that you are, first of all, introducing yourself, secondly, the client. Thirdly, you are writing or talking about what is the application for, and then you write about seeking permission to actually move on to the next section. And the last thing that you have to mention in the introduction is making sure that you are addressing the judge as sir or madam. That's very important, and also making sure that you are referring your client as the claimant or the defendant, depending on what you're doing. But usually you're going to be addressing your client as the claimant because they are the one who's bringing the case to the court and so on. And you have to keep that consistent as much as you can, because in that way it shows your professionality, that you have practiced a lot and you're very confident in what you're saying and how you're delivering the actual work to the court or to the judge in the next 20 minutes. The next section of the whole assessment is all about the facts. I highly recommend for you to keep the facts summary as short as between 1 to 2 minutes, or even 1 minute, the better. The shorter it is, the better, but you may want to make it as concise as possible so that the court does not feel like, oh my god, where's this girl saying, or anything like that, because if that's the case, then we'll never be able to understand how the things happen or what are the sequences of the story, and they basically feel lost. So you don't want to make them feel lost. So make sure that you are keeping the facts a minimum between 1 to 2 minutes and not too long. You don't want to cover too much the whole fact scenario sheet that have been given to you before the assessment. You don't want to copy that out, but also you don't want to make it so little that the court does not understand what is the story about. So keep a really nice balance between the two, and the only way to do that is by practice, of course, on how to write them, and also looking at the sample guide answers that are usually given to you by the module leaders to give an idea what they're expecting you to write in terms of that particular topic as well, or that type of application. So it's very important that you look at the sample guides and also make sure that your facts are between 1 to 2 minutes and not too long, because you don't want to cover too much but also not cover too little. And yeah, that should give you hopefully a pass for this part of the assessment. Now I'll be giving you tips to the most important part of the assessment, which is all about submissions. So I think the submissions is a very important part of the assessment because this is where all of your arguments are going to be put together, your skills in terms of putting all the arguments together with all the documents and so on that are given to you before the assessment is going to be counted. And this is basically going to determine whether you pass or fail. So I highly recommend for you to listen to this part very carefully. And if I'm looking on that side, is mostly because I have all my notes and I don't want to lose anything out. But the first thing that I highly recommend for you to do in terms of submissions is making sure that you're referring all the documents that are given to you in the code bundle. Even if you mention it once in the whole assessment, that's absolutely fine. At least they will be able to tell, they will be able to see that you have actually used all the documents in the bundle. Number 2 tip in terms of submissions is making sure that you're not repeating the same argument twice, because that's just prolonging your argument for no reason, and you can actually write it in once. That's absolutely fine as well. Number 3 tip is making sure that you're keeping it very short and simple and you're not trying to making it overly long just because you want to make sure that the judge thinks you're very smart or you're very confident, because that's actually going to show the opposite. Number 4 tip in terms of submissions is making sure that you are referring to sir and madam before moving on to the next submission. So you refer to them, you keep them engaged into your submissions very, very carefully by making sure that you're referring to them very regularly by referring them to as sir or madam. So that's very important. And the last tip in terms of submissions is making sure that you are pointing out the weaknesses in your argument as well. And this doesn't have to be like 5 paragraphs, but just one little point saying that, you don't say like this, but you say something like, there might be a flaw in my argument because of this, blah, blah, blah. So you have to be very careful in how you address everything, of course, and don't say like the way I just said now, but try to make it as simple, shortcut and simple, and also make it look like you have referred to every single document, and also you refer to them as sir and madam as many times as possible to show that you're keeping them engaged, and also making sure that you are not repeating the same argument twice, because that's just going to make it longer and not give you enough space or time to talk about other important things in the assessment. So the last part of the assessment is all about the summary part, and this is basically where you want to summarize everything that you have basically said in the whole entire assessment in the past few minutes and try to basically put it together into a summary. And always end this part of the assessment as, do you have any questions? Or do you have any questions? Do you have any queries? If you have any questions, then please do ask me now. So this is a really polite way to actually let the customer know, or the judge know that you are giving them respect to actually ask you any questions that they might have. They might feel confused any part of the assessment, but usually in the assessment, if they don't want to make you fail, of course, they will not ask you any questions, but because they want to finish the assessment on a rightly manner, and just basically they want you to finish on the time, of course, because the teachers are not evil. So it's making sure that you are in the last part of the assessment is summarizing everything that you have said in the assessment. And number 2 is making sure that you're ending it with a question such as, do you have any questions? Or if you have any questions, you can ask me now. This is the best way to end it, and it gives you respect to the others, and also it shows that you're done basically. So yeah. So the day before the exam, in terms of the advocacy exam, what I would do is making sure that I'm practicing the assessment as much as I can. The second thing that I would definitely do is making sure that I'm printing out the script in color and hard copy so that I can practice on it as much as I can, because in the assessment, you will not be allowed a laptop or somewhere that you can read off the screen unless you're doing it online. So that's a different case. But if you're doing it in person, like the way I did, then definitely please do, print out the script in hard copy and make it colorful, and try to make sure that it's very visible to you whatever you're saying whenever you're going to be delivering your work. And the last thing that I highly recommend for you to do in terms of the day before the assessment is making sure that you are using converter of words to time in Google, or basically time yourself. And that's a really good way to also assess yourself whether you're actually talking too much and you're going over your time limit, or you're under delivering yourself, or how many minutes are left till you actually end the assessment. So it's very, very important that you're practicing through that, and you are practicing with the work in front of you and in hand and a hard copy, and also making sure that you're timing yourself, and also making sure that you're practicing as much as you can. So I hope that this has made sense, and what to do the day before the exam, and how to really practice it as much as you can so you can pass the next day. So now I'll be covering in terms of what to do or to make sure that you're boosting your chances of passing during the actual assessment. So the first thing that I highly recommend for you to do is to keep the eye contact as straight as possible in the eyes of the court or the judge, to show that you're very confident, and that can only come through practice, of course. The second thing that I highly recommend for you to do is making sure that you're not rushing through your points because you're feeling like you're running out of time. But I promise to you, you will not be running out of time if you're practicing enough the day before or the weeks before the assessment. So the best way to do it is obviously practice, but also making sure that you're not rushing yourself is a really good way, because if you rush yourself, the court will never be able to understand all the points that you're saying or whatever you're trying to deliver. So it's very important that you're keeping your pace as a medium, or not too fast or too slow as well. And the last thing that I would definitely tell you is to make sure that you are keeping check of your time regularly during the assessment on your Google or your phone or whatever, and make sure that you are knowing exactly how many minutes are left till the assessment, because the teacher will never be able to tell you that during the assessment, because they're focusing on making notes and noting down how well you're doing on the assessment as well. So I highly recommend for you to make sure that you are keeping a check of your time on Google phone or the clock that might be in the room. Number 2 is making sure that you are not rushing through your points. And number 3 is making sure that you are keeping the eye contact with the judge as long as you can throughout the whole assessment. I hope all of you have enjoyed this video about how to pass advocacy module in the legal practice course, because I know that this is one of the modules that is very nerve-wracking as well, because you're going to be talking to a court or a judge in front of you, and you have to submit all of those things in front of them in the next 20 minutes, and that's the time limit I believe that it is right now. But yeah, I hope that all these tips that I've shared with you all really do help you, because these have definitely helped me in terms of passing the assessment really, really well. And if you want to see more videos regarding all the other modules that are in the legal practice course and how to pass them, then please do like this video and share this video with all the legal practice course students, and make it to, let's say, I would say 100 likes, hopefully. But yeah, hopefully this video really helps you in passing the advocacy assessment, and I hopefully pray that you'll be sharing this video with everyone. And also please do check out my vlogs that I've uploaded in the past year regarding my journey in the LPC. But other than that, I'll see you guys in my next week's video.